Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and we've been doing some book reviews to get us through this forced staycation, and you may have seen our pile is getting both bigger and smaller. So I heard about a book and I couldn't resist. So we're going to add something to our little stack. We're going to get to Braiding Sweetgrass in just a second. I actually didn't open this. I wanted to wait for you for these new books. So the first one, whatever you think of the SPCCX, no, Archbishop Lefebvre. When I heard a show about him recently, and I found out his mother was a secular Franciscan, and it's not like there's a lot of secular Franciscan layperson, right? Not like a priest or already a saint out there, biographies. And I thought, what a great opportunity. I was so excited. So this is actually the story of Archbishop Lefebvre's mother. And it's a little picture of her there. You can see with baby. I don't know if that's him. Let's see. It says, this is a story, the Mother of the Lefebvre family, the mother of Archbishop Lefebvre, written in 1948 by her spiritual director. She was a holy woman, but with fears no different than those of today's Catholic parents. With the birth of their first child, Madame Lefebvre became aware of her responsibilities as a mother, to form the soul of the infant that God had given to her, to give it the right direction and to sanctify it seemed beyond her strength. But the Lord showed her the way. It is by sanctifying myself that I will obtain the graces to sanctify my children. Education, above all maternal education, is in fact much more of an outpouring of the soul than a syllabus for a teacher. While describing her strong commitment to the ordinary way of salvation, the author also reveals some of what is known about her extraordinary mysticism. And here's actually a picture of her with her husband and all their kids. I just thought, it's a really short book. It's not going to take us long. And I thought, what a cute little blessing on motherhood for this time. And if you don't have a lot of time to read, it's a much shorter biography. So we're going to add that to our stack. I don't even remember what the other book was. It must have been something too good. Oh, it's an older version of the Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and the Office of the Dead. So I misplaced mine. Secular Franciscans know that we can pray these offices as part of our daily obligation to pray two of the offices. And I lost the little blue one I had that was a current version, but I found a lot more supporting documents for one of the older ones. So this is from Angelus Press, and it's in Latin and English. This is the text of it from the 1915 Benzinger Brothers edition, with some updated punctuation and slight rewording. So this, I have a lot of documents that help you with study this book, and it doesn't work with the new one at all. So I was looking to find a copy of the old one. So I was kind of excited. So it's, again, that's a Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary and the Office of the Dead in Latin and English. And I'll check with my superiors whether this particular version still counts to meet my obligation, or whether it has to be the current updated one. Anyway, I was just kind of excited to find it. So that's on our little stack. Okay, so Braiding Sweetgrass by Wall Kimmerer. I'll tell you my main impression, and I'm not going to review it the whole way through because I want you to be able to read it and yeah, form your own opinions. But I also want you to read it if you want to. Braiding Sweetgrass. So she weaves different things together, and they're going to sound like things that sound very secular Franciscan, that sound very me. So you may be surprised to know I'm not the biggest fan of this book. On the surface, I'm very much a fan of this book as a book club book or as a challenge. Okay, so what she does is she's very much a poet, and she's weaving together native wisdom, and she has a PhD in, wait, let's see if it says. Nope, it says Mother Scientist Decorated Professor. A professor of environmental biology. So she's a professor of environmental biology, and so she's weaving together, with her poetry, she weaves together native wisdoms, scientific knowledge, her own story, and her own kind of social teachings that are the end result of it. So what am I talking about here? She likes to talk. It's a book of contradictions, is why I don't really like it. So 1 minute she's saying our story of origin for her people is about Sky Woman, who there's only one tree in the sky, and it has all the different berries and fruits are on this one tree. And the wind comes and knocks it down, and there's this big hole, and Sky Woman is leaning over the hole, and she falls through, and as she falls through, she grabs onto the branches, and she ends up with a bunch of the seeds from the tree, right? But she falls through, and she's saved by the animals, and because she's saved by the animals, who then one gives its life, because the earth is all water at that point, one of the animals gives its life to bring up some mud, and another one becomes a base for the mud, and so she plants all the seeds she brought, and that's where the land and all the trees come from. And so she says, and it's so different, because in her origin story, what she sees in the beginning is all these gifts. So someone is giving a gift, they save her life, and in turn she gives them all these great different trees and fruits to eat. And so there's a relationship between them where they give each other gifts, they give each other what they need, both the earth, its inhabitants, the animals, and the people. They're going to give back and forth because, oh right, she was pregnant when she fell through the sky, so that's how we get more people. And she's like, well, and that's why it doesn't work for you European descent, even though she's also of European descent. So the book is very much of a us, them, us, you. You know, I feel like that's the vibe I get from the book. You're drawn into her love of her rediscovering her native roots and falling in love with the people and their relationship with the earth. But it still feels very much to me like an us, them, and pointing finger kind of book. That's what I don't feel was done super well. So she's saying, though, Sky Woman fell through, and she has this big generous response of gifting, a gift culture between the earth and the animals and the people. And she's like, but yours, Eve was in exile, and she was forced to work for everything, and that's why you guys get it all wrong, because you had to subdue the earth. But later on, you learn that there was some original man in these stories, and he came and he found the people were being lazy and not following that rule, and now they have to work by the sweat of their brow to get their things. He diluted things so that they have to work harder. So to me, those stories are sort of similar, but she's saying, you know, oh, our native teachings are so much better. Well, things in our Bible, what we were originally taught was better too, but we don't always do it, and yes, God punished us. So there's actually more similarities than she sees, but to me, she's very much separating them. She says in English and European languages, I don't know why she doesn't say the Romance languages. So she's like, in European languages, nouns are broken up by gender, masculine and feminine. In native ways, they're broken up into animate and inanimate. And more things. And then she's like, oh, but no, a lot of things that we English people would, European descent people would consider things, they consider verbs, because water is living to them. So water has different verbs. It has a verb to be snow, it has a verb to be a bay, it has a verb to be a creek, right? Because in all of its different forms, it's still water, but they consider water to be living, and so it needs its own set of verbs of how it is being. So that's where it gets a little weird too for me, because they consider mountains and trees and everything to be spirits. And at one point, I don't know that I'm going to find it now. She was teaching, possibly some grad students, she was teaching a class and had them out and was telling them about this language barrier. And one of the boys was like, oh, so because of the way we're taught nouns in English, it causes us to call things like rocks in nature and animals as its. And since we call it an it, we know it's okay to disrespect it. And I get where he's going with that, but that's such a generalization. I don't think that the language tells us to abuse the land. Because he says that we don't give personhood. I don't give personhood to rocks. Goodness, friends, you know I love rocks. One of my favorite stories from childhood, we had an extra little piece of land. So my house was actually a double house, and there was a lane that went alongside it. On the other side of the lane was still a piece of land that belonged to the original house. And that piece of land had these big, big rocks on it. And the rocks sparkled in the sunlight. And they were huge rocks that you could climb on. And especially when it was a snowy time, we loved to go out there and climb up on the rocks. And you could use those big rocks as a base to build some tremendous snow creations. And I loved those rocks. And I did speak to the rocks, possibly, and thank them for, helping me build things. But I never treated them as if they were alive. I thanked God for the gift of the rock, right? So that's the difference. She sees everything in nature giving to others, that it's all self-sacrificing for others is how it comes across at times. She talks about like the pecan trees, the weak ones maybe don't have enough stored up to produce nuts yet that year, but the other trees do. And so they start a process. And because they have forced that little guy who's not ready yet to make nuts, that tree may not make it, but his progeny will, by the sheer fact that he probably only produced a few nuts. But all the trees around produced a ton of nuts. And so when the squirrels come and the people come to eat them, there's still going to be, that little guy may still have some make it because all the other trees also produced a bunch of pecans at one time. Are you following this? And it's true. I totally know that observation. Some years, all the trees, tons of nuts, right? Or they're really early and they're really tiny and none of them are good. And it seems all the trees are connected and do that. And she mentions that. She mentions the science of the fungus that lives on the roots of trees. Unlike some of our other books, and we know by now probably what I dislike, some of our other books have done this as well. She mentions all this great science. Not a single citation. I don't think there's a single reference or bibliography in the back. There's an acknowledgement. There is sources in the back. So let's see. What are the sources in the back? So, okay. I'm seeing something odd. There is a note on the sources in the back. But there's something missing here. Sorry, we didn't even do our regular book walk. There is an epilogue. Defeating Wendigo. No, that's the rest of the book. Okay, I'm not missing it. The sources in the back of the book, I'll read them to you and see if you can guess why I'm not super happy about them. Grandmother's Delight, a medicine woman's source book. Silu Seeking the Corn Mother's Wisdom. The Miss Holmes book, The Voice of the Ojibwa. Sacred Ecology, Keepers of Life Discovering Plants Through Native American Stories and Earth Activities for Children. Look to the Mountain, An Ecology of Indigenous Education. The Gift, Imagination in the Erotic Life of Property. The Spiritual World of the Ojibwa. I apologize for mispronouncing things. Recovering the Sacred, The Power of Naming and Claiming. World as Lover, World as Self, Courage for Global Justice and Ecological Renewal. Moral Ground, Ethical Action for a Planet in Peril. Original Instructions, Indigenous Teachings for a Sustainable Future. Traditional Mohawk Indians return to their ancestral homeland. The Woodland Indians of the Western Great Lakes. Sky Woman, Legends of the Iroquois. Tree of Life to the Northwest Coast Indians. Thanksgiving Address, Greetings to the Natural Worlds. Wisdom of the Elders, Sacred Native Stories of Nature. Living Our Language. She has tons of science in this book, and there is not one straight up scientific resource. Maybe one of these does talk about the fungus and the tree roots, but I am not going to know. There's no kinds of footnotes or anything, or even a note just to refer me back to the source, even if not the page numbered, back to the source. None of that. And that's what I'm disappointed in. Her stories are beautiful. Beautiful stories. I love that she's reclaiming the language. She does seem to have very much, again, an us-them. I have relatives who were forced, whose relatives, their grandparents, were forced into the Indian schools, the Indian mission schools, and some of their family members loved that school. They loved the trade that they got to learn. They loved everything about it. He's visited the place, and the people remember his grandfather, and they love talking to him and what he's doing now and catching up with the family. It was not, the mission schools did not always have ill intent. Did some people? Probably. Was it to completely destroy their culture because they were an awful, ignorant people? Not always. Some of the mission schools, they took the kids out because life on the reservation was incredibly hard. And it was a way to help the kids to make sure they got fed. Are you hearing anything that goes on now? Much like our public schools today, feeding the kids, teaching them proper language. It's very similar to our public schools today, only they're not physically taking them completely away yet. And it's one of the reasons I do recommend homeschooling, and one of the reasons in this particular little crisis we're in right now, where now the school kids don't have food because they were getting all their food from the schools, and now there's no school and they can't get food. And that is a problem. So sometimes our intentions are really fabulous and great, and they have unexpected consequences that we personally don't see. Sometimes the powers that be do see those problems coming down the line, and sometimes they don't. And that's why I didn't like the us versus them connotations in this book. That's what angered me about this book. Just always assuming, your culture is what caused this ecological crisis, not ours. But then she even admits that it says, original man says there was a crisis at one time. And we know that from history, that's one of the big hypotheses of like what happened to the Mayans, what happened to the mound people that built Stonehenge out in the Midwest. What happened to that? That was a big flourishing city and it disappeared. Was it an ecological crisis of their own making? And scientists have been studying that. And I'm not trying to, I know this is probably going to get some flack, and I'm okay with that. I'm just not going to worship people because they were native. Yes, there's a lot of native knowledge, and I'm always telling you to get out there and learn where you are. Learn the natural history of things, and then that wisdom can be passed down. But people still have a choice whether or not to use that knowledge. And just because of people have that knowledge doesn't mean they're using it properly. It doesn't mean that there isn't some abuse going on. It doesn't mean that everything about them is perfect. It's the idea of the noble savage. There were still problems. There were still wars. There were other things going on. So to me, this is a very romantic book. And she talks about like a gift economy, where because I know you need something, I'm just going to give it to you because I have it. And that's wonderful in small community. But I don't know how it works as much when we start talking about things like healthcare and medicine. And yes, I also use natural means of medicine when I can. I use that native knowledge, right? But there are times when I need things bigger than myself. My mom had pneumonia last year, and, she had to have breathing treatments and stuff. She had a problem with a kidney stone and needed to have a stent put in. That's not something I would expect somebody to gift us. That's something that we need more. And yeah, so I do believe in gifting. Now we are in this crisis, we're here, and people need toilet paper. And I had a friend who put on Facebook that she only had a roll and a half for their family of 4 for the next 2 weeks, and they were unable to find toilet paper. And I know there was an outpouring of support to people that said, hey, well, I could give you a roll or 2. And enough people had offered. They did manage to find some the next day, but enough people had offered that we probably could have covered that family, right? And same with food and other things. I think people are finding out, hey, you still need that. I did get that. And maybe I have a little bit more than I need, and I can share that with you. So I do see that going on already, and that's wonderful and lovely. Do I think that that could go on a bigger scale? I mean, that'd be lovely. It really would. I just don't see how that would work out. So the book, I thought, the sections on her home life, how she grew up and her family, they are some beautiful, beautiful stories. She is truly a poet. Her science is great. I wish that she would cite things so that people could look it up and learn more, and I'm really disappointed that she didn't. She has only native sources in the back, which is great, but I don't know that that's covering all the topics she covers in here. Like, even she talks about Christian teachings and what's wrong with them, but I don't know where that came from. Was that just her own opinion? Is that from something she read? I don't know, because she doesn't list it. The things that she says about the English language, is that in here somewhere? Can I find that? I don't know. So if you ever write a book like this, or to the author, to Robin Wall Kimmerer, if she happens to see this, I want to know your sources. I want to know more. Your poetry is wonderful. I love the way that you connect with nature. I do admire that. I'm always telling people, get out, know your native plants, know the ones that are near you, learn tracks. Yesterday we had on how to identify animals from their teeth and tooth structure. So yeah, I mean, I love that aspect. I love making a relationship with Earth. Am I going to treat every animal as a person? No, I'm not. I'm just not. I am going to treat humans as having personhood and animals as being animals. Technically, we're under the same classification, but I do believe that people are different. We have a soul given to us by our Creator, and that we're different. Yeah. So I want to love this book. I love this book as a discussion starter more than I love the book by itself. So I guess that's my final review. So God bless, friends. Not sure which of these books we'll do tomorrow. I may need a break and read something that I know. I might go ahead and preview and see who does have sources for things they have, so that I can get you a book that I feel a little bit more confident in recommending. And God bless. I hope you're enjoying the staycation. My husband and I are working on some funny videos as well. So God bless. Please stay safe. If you need anything, reach out to your community, both for prayer and any practical needs you may have. God bless, friends.